From here on, a little bit in English. Today's my third time I talk about the Hachi-dainingaku chapter, 8 awarenesses of a true adult. 2 months ago, the first time I talked a little bit about adult practice, and last time I talked about the relationship between the Eightfold Path and the 8 awarenesses of a true adult. I think they are, how do you say, closely connected, but there's also a slight difference. One difference maybe is that the Eightfold Path is a path that leads you finally to nirvana, while, for example, already in the first of the 8 awarenesses of a true adult, the Buddha says, if you have the first awareness, which means small desires, you already have attained nirvana. So it's not a path towards a goal, but it is the goal in a way. Also, the Eightfold Path talks about right speech, right action, right livelihood. You don't find this here, but you find a somewhat more straight and simple approach in the first 2 awarenesses, which are small desire and knowing that one has enough. Let me translate kind of on the spot from the Japanese originally. First is small desire. Small desire means that you do not limitlessly, so to speak, without end, that you do not endlessly chase after those 5 desires which are not fulfilled yet. And I think maybe I spoke last time about the 5 desires. One simple way of explaining it, it's the desires of the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body itself, everything that we long for, the objects of our senses. And there's always something that we don't have yet, but we would like to have it. But if we don't know at one point, I don't need that, we will spend our whole lives chasing after something that we don't have. And here the Buddha doesn't speak about no desires. He doesn't say you shouldn't have no desires. So it's okay to be hungry, to be thirsty, to prefer to have a roof over your head when you sleep at night. But you should know the limit. And if you know the limit, and if the limit is enough for you to live, for example, you have enough to eat for the winter, and the building in which you live is cared for enough so that you and others will be able to practice there for another decade or 2, or hopefully for another 50 years or so. Antaji has been standing in the spot where it's now for 50 years now almost, and would be nice if in 50 years would still be there. Of course, nobody knows about the future, but that would be nice. But you don't have to worry about the next 500 years. And also nobody would kind of think we need the Hondo to be twice as big as it was. And we want it to be, I don't know, covered with golden tiles. No. As long as it's not leaking through the roof, that's enough. And if you only desire what you really need, then you're not a slave of your desires anymore. Because what we really need is not so much. What you really need over the winter is usually what you can harvest in the autumn, or often what you harvest in the autumn is even more than you need for the winter. And the Buddha says in his last teaching before he entered nirvana, or at least according to a sutra that you don't find in the Pali Canon, but one of the Mahayana sutras. The Japanese title is Yui Kyogyo, the last sutra of the Buddha. The Buddha said, you bhikkhus should know that a person with lots of desires, who's chasing after lots of things, will also suffer a lot. A person with small desires, because he doesn't have these desires, also doesn't have this problem. Therefore, you should all learn and practice small desires. All of the virtues will appear out of small desires. If you have small desires, all of the virtues will appear out of that. A person with small desires doesn't have to bend himself. Maybe after I finish this chapter, the Hachi-dainingaku, I will speak about a different chapter from the Shobogenzo. It has the Japanese title Bodhisattva Shishoho, 4 ways of a bodhisattva to connect to the world, to connect to all living beings. And these 4 ways are: first, dana, giving; second, aigo, in Japanese, words of love, loving words; third, cooperating, helping others; and fourth, being one, being in harmony. And about the first one, Dogen Zenji explains, dana, giving, means to, I think the English word was to not covet yourself. Basically what he means there is don't play somebody else who you are not. And at first it's a little bit surprising. What does dana have to do with coveting or kind of trying to fool people? But the explanation is quite simple. Because you don't want to give, but rather you want others to praise you. You want others to give to you. You want to be seen by others. That you play a role that isn't really you. So the first act of giving is to be honest about yourself, to be authentic. Being authentic is the first step of dana. Just be yourself. And basically here, the Buddha is saying the same. If you have small desires, you can be authentic. There's no need for you to be inauthentic. There's no need for you to play a different role. So if you have small desires, you don't have to, well, I said, bend yourself. Be inauthentic. To curry favor with other people. You won't be pulled around by your desires. One example would be an ox. In past times, the farmers used ox to plow their fields. And if the ox is going straight at a steady pace, it's a great help plowing the field. So not every desire is bad. We need a certain amount of desire, otherwise nothing would keep us alive. We need a certain amount of desire. But just as the ox that's pulling the plow, if the ox goes in all direction and it's running wild, will destroy the fields. And that's what happens if you don't know the limits to your desire. You don't know the difference between things you really need and things you actually don't need. If you don't know this difference, you will be like a farmer that is pulled around by a crazy oxen. People with small desires are not pulled around by their desires. Their mind will always be stable and calm. And they have nothing to worry about which is very close to something that's said in the Hanya Shingyo. Somewhere in the middle, there's this phrase in Japanese, Shin mu kege, mu kege ko mu u kufu, only issai tendo muso kugyo nehan. Shin mu kege means there's no obstacle in the mind. There's nothing basically inside that I grasp to. And usually we grasp to something. That's me, for example, your identity. Those things that you identify with. And if other people don't, how do you say, acknowledge that this is me, you're hurt. You feel triggered. You feel bullied. You feel endangered if people don't want to see you the way you want to be seen. Or in the end, what all of us cling to is the life, your life. If there's one thing you don't want to lose, it's your life. But usually it's not only your life, but there's also possessions that you cling to. And the more you cling to, the more is your worry that people will take that away from you. People don't see me the way I want to be seen. People will take away what I don't want to give. And in the end, I will even lose my life. The more you have of that, the more worries. And if you accept the fact that you can't even keep this life, each day is going to be my last day. I'm dying. Every day of my life, I'm dying just a little bit. But that's okay. That's okay. You don't have to worry anything about anything. Everything's going to be taken away. So what should I worry about? As Janis Joplin sung, or it's a Chris Christopherson song, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. If there's nothing left to lose, your mind is free. You're free. Shin mu kege ko mu kufu. So there's nothing left in your mind that you want to keep. There's nothing that you're afraid of. Mu kufu only issai tendo muso kugyo nehan. And thus you, how do you say, become free of all upside down views. Upside down view, one example would be the view that it's all about me. It's all about me. I should be at the center of the universe. That's an obvious upside down view, but a lot of people, a lot of us have this. At the end of the day, we think, no, it is about me. But when you get free of this view, that's when you attain nirvana. And what is said here in the Hachi-dainingaku is basically more or less the same. If you have small desires, your mind will be calm and at peace, and there's nothing you need to be afraid of. Whatever you encounter, you will have more than enough. So if you only need enough for the winter until the spring, you might realize, oh, we have enough. Even if one or two would join us now, we would still have enough. If you only take care that it's not raining through the roof, then probably there's going to be enough space. Like in the past, sometimes there were times when lots of people came to Antaiji, and I never said we are full. But sometimes there were more than 20, so people had to share a room. And I was kind of surprised that people started to say, but we don't have any space anymore. But who said that you have a right to your own personal room? Why can't two people stay in a room? I think in the past, when Antaiji was built, there were at sometimes 30 people. 3 people were sleeping in one 6 tatami room. If you have small desires, 3 people fit in there. Of course, you have only two oshi-ile, but still, I mean, if you don't have so many belongings, three people's stuff will also fit into two oshi-ile. So that's basically small desire. And if you have big desire, you will never be happy with your room. You always want a different room. If you're living in the first floor, you want to go to the second floor. If you're living in the second floor, you think that maybe the first floor was better, whatever. If you have small desires, you will always realize I have more than enough. I have more than I could wish for. People with small desires have already attained nirvana. That's what is called small desire. And then the next one, often in Japanese, shoyoku chisoku is used as one phrase, one expression. Shoyoku means small desire, chisoku means knowing it's enough. And actually they're very closely related. If you would ask me, well, is there a small difference somewhere? I would say, well, having small desire doesn't necessarily mean that you know that you have enough. For example, people with deep depression, often they have very small desire. They are not very hungry. They have very small sexual desires. They don't have interest in money. They don't want to go shopping. They don't go to parties. They even have very small desire for their life. They might wish they are dead already. But do they know that they have enough? No, no. They are deeply depressed. So having small desires is not necessarily the same than this positive, knowing I have enough, more than I could wish for. It's good the way it is. So the second aspect emphasizes the positive aspect of having small desires, namely knowing it's enough, it's enough. So knowing that's enough means that in whatever you get, whatever you attain, you are satisfied. You're satisfied with exactly what you have. For example, also the fact that you were born on a certain day with certain parents as this person. And a lot of us are not even satisfied with that. Why couldn't I be a different person? Why couldn't I be born in a different country, in a different century? You're happy with that, and you're happy with the whole story that happened after that. It doesn't mean that you should never think about how should I live today? How should I live the rest of my life? Of course, you should take responsibility for that. But you can't, at least one thing that you can't change is the past. Be happy with that. That's one aspect of being satisfied with all you have attained. Be satisfied with the whole story just the way it developed until right now in this moment. And again, that doesn't mean that you become, how do you say, complacent and you don't care at all about your life. Of course you should care, because today is also your last day. But let's get to the text. The Buddha said, you bhikkhus, if you want to be free from all suffering, you should the character here says to watch or to see through the knowing of enough. So a shorter version would be, if you want to be free from suffering, you should know it's enough. You should be aware of the fact that it is enough. If you know it's enough, then you found the place that's stable, that is safe. You have found your place of stability. A person that knows that he or she has enough will be happy and safe even if he or she sleeps on the floor. And I think here the Buddha means, and even without a futon, you don't have a bed, you don't have a futon. You sleep right on the floor or maybe on a park bench. Hopefully, at least you have some shelter from the rain. You don't need a bed to be happy if you know you have enough. On the other hand, a person that doesn't know when it's enough will be unhappy even when he or she is living in a palace. I need a bigger house, I need more cars, I need more girlfriends or boyfriends. You will never have enough. And even if you have a million, a billion, a trillion dollars on your bank account, you have so many bitcoins and other cryptocurrency in your wallet, you will not have enough, and you're worried. You're worried all the time that somebody could take it away from you. A person that doesn't know when it's enough, even if he is rich or she is rich, they are poor. They are poor. In their mind, they're always poor. They always have this thought, I need more. A person that knows it's enough will be, even though others see him or her as a poor person, he will be rich. A truly rich person is the person that knows I have enough. The person that doesn't know that it's enough will always be pulled around by his 5 desires. And the person that knows it's enough will pity such a person that's pulled around. That's what you call knowing enough. Okay, so far English. Let me continue a little bit in Japanese. So the third aspect, the third awareness of a true adult, in Japanese, gyo jakujo, the kanji, the character for gyo, can also mean to be happy, to enjoy something. Jakujo means peaceful, silent place, to enjoy silence, to enjoy the stillness. But in this case, gyo means to look for a still place, to look for a silent place. And in the text it says, well, it's not a busy part of the town. It's not downtown. It's not the part of the town where all the bars are, but it means to be completely by yourself somewhere in the mountain. So from somebody who's living in a city, Antaiji is exactly that place, deep in the mountains. At 5 around this time of the year, it's already getting dark. There are no neon lights, no stores that are still open. So in a way, in Antaiji, you are already in that place. But I don't know about you, but in my case, I found even in Antaiji often it was quite loud. In the summer, you have the frogs, you have the semi that make a lot of noise. When the wind blows, that can be quite noisy. The rain, and in the winter the snow falling from the roof. But even more than that, you're not alone. There's other people, and when people walk, for example, on the second floor in the corridor, they make this noise. You can hear them when they go to the toilet at night. Why are people so noisy? And in the daytime, somebody's working with a chainsaw. There's always some kind of noise to be heard. How can I finally find a place where it's really quiet? How can I find real quietude? And the answer, of course, is you will never find it as long as you don't become quiet. If you are annoyed by noises, be it natural noises, be it mechanic noises, be it the noises that people make. For example, you share your room with somebody, but that person is snoring. Of course, it's not quiet. But if you can accept that noise, then it will be quiet. And you can even be in the middle of the city. It's completely quiet, even in Tokyo and Osaka. If you're not bothered by, for example, where I'm sitting right now, this room, every 5 minutes, there's a plane flying exactly over my house. In the beginning, when I just moved here, I found it's a little bit noisy. I wasn't too bothered by it, but now I can hardly hear the noise anymore. Sometimes people, when they watch my videos, they say, "What's that noise in the background?" Oh, yeah, that's a plane. Or sometimes there's also two schools on both sides, a middle school and an elementary school. And of course, there's noise from the playing children during the break time. But it's only noise when you label it as noise. If you're completely fine with that noise, nothing could be more quiet than the sounds of the playing children and even the planes that cross your house. So here we're talking about how important quietude is. And it's not only physical quietude, but the quiet that you can find inside yourself. Gyo Jakujo in Japanese, enjoying quietude, longing for quietude. It means to separate yourself from noisy locations and all by yourself stay in a void place. And as I said, all by yourself in a void place can mean right in the middle of the city. It means to rest in yourself, to be not dependent on others, what others say, or how others judge you. As long as you're dependent on what others do, you compare yourself, you will always live in the noise, even in Antaji. It will be always noisy inside you. This person did this, that person said that. That person is too lazy, that person works too much, whatever. You will always have something to complain. But when you rest in yourself, the complaining stops, and that's when you find quietude. The Buddha said, you bhikkhus should look for a place of quietude. And here he also says mui. Mui in Chinese means wu wei, the state of non-doing. So that's why Sawaki Roshi always says, Zazen is good for nothing, because you shouldn't do it with the attitude, I practice Zazen in order to attain enlightenment. Well, the problem with that attitude is, first, you have a goal, so you're not really in the sitting anymore. The other problem is there's this thought, I do Zazen. I want to get enlightened. And Wu Wei means not that you don't do anything. It doesn't mean that you lie idly under the tree all day and just sip your tea. Wu Wei is a state of great action, but there's no I or me in the action. You're completely active without the I. Zazen is doing Zazen. The Tenzo is doing the Tenzo. So you bhikkhus should look for a quiet place, which is also the place of Wu Wei, action without an I. And if you look for that, separate yourself from the busy places. If you live in quietude, even the deities in heaven, like the old Hinduist deities like Indra and others, they will all respect you. So in a way, what he's saying here, if you don't look for the respect of other people anymore, if you don't worry about the judgment of others, that's when even the gods in heaven will respect you. Of course, the person himself wouldn't bother about that either. You don't do this, you don't practice this, so that eventually some deities or gods will respect you. On the other hand, if you look for the respect of others, you will never gain the respect that you hope for. And that, of course, also goes for SNS. So a place for quietude, if you live somewhere on a lonely island, the only thing you have is connection to the internet. Of course, there's no quietude anymore. If every day on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, wherever you are, you want to be seen by people, you want them to give you thumbs up, and it's all about how can I get more thumbs up? How can I avoid to get thumbs down? While the person that's resting in himself, for him, these thumbs, this game, even if he plays the game, it doesn't matter anymore. You're not dependent on the game anymore. And that's when even the gods in heaven will respect you. While if you look for respect, you will never get the respect. Therefore, let go of, in Japanese, it's koshu tashu, your people and other people. So basically what's meant here, your friends, your family, society as a whole. Of course, we can never leave society totally. We don't even have to cut the connections with our friends and family. It's just that you shouldn't depend on them. You shouldn't always worry about what do they think about me now? How do they judge me being an antaiji practicing here? Maybe I'm disappointing their expectations. Maybe I should do something else. You would always live your life for them. You will always be a pawn in somebody else's game. And here, the third point in being a true adult is stopping that. Stopping being a part of somebody else's game. Stopping to judge yourself through the eyes of the others. Stop to worry about how they see you. So for that, you let go of friends, family, society as a whole. Kugen ni dokushushi, and you rest quietly in yourself. And thus you will get rid of your suffering, because the suffering stems from what I usually call the game. Always calculating how you can win points, how you can be better than the others, and also make the others acknowledge that you won all these points. And once you stop collecting points, that's when you're free from that suffering. A person that's looking for a lot of acknowledgement, a person that wants to have lots of friends, will have lots of problems. And yeah, the more accounts you have, for example, Instagram, you got Facebook, you got Twitter, you got YouTube, you got TikTok, you're on Signal, you're on Telegram, you're everywhere. The more of these you have, the more friends you have, the more connections you have, the wider your world is. But paradoxically, the more problems you have, the more you suffer. So start with resting yourself, resting in yourself, rest in yourself. The more connections you have, the more problems you have. Of course, we're always living in a state of interconnectedness. So it's not about, how do you say, being totally independent and not connecting with others. We're already connected, but in our minds, we should rest in ourselves. And the metaphor for that is a big tree. You are the big tree, but if there's lots of birds sitting in the branches, if it's too many, eventually the branches will break. The entanglements of this world, the mundane entanglements, make you drown in suffering. And that's like an old elephant that doesn't get out of the mud. The rice fields where you get your rice from, about 20 years ago, I started to make them bigger, but I had no ideas how a rice field should be done. I thought, well, I use the power shovel and just dig as deep as possible and then make the surface flat. But that led to the fact that for a couple of years, not only would the people sink in the rice field when they planted it, but also when we were doing the plowing with the tractor would sink. Even a big tractor would sink and almost disappear in the rice field. So next we would come with a bulldozer to pull the tractor out of the rice field. What happens is even the bulldozer sinks in the rice fields. And in the old times in India, probably they had similar problems with even elephants sinking in rice fields or in the mud. It's almost impossible to get out through your own strength. And that happens if you make yourself dependent on how others see you. So stop doing that. Rest in yourself, the Buddha is saying. And well, that's what's called quietude, real quietude, or being independent from the mundane world. Okay, so that's the third of the 8 awarenesses of a true adult person. And maybe I want to end my talk here today, but if you have questions or anything you would like to share, you're welcome to do so.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So you were so you were talking about the first of the means, and you described them as having small desire, but you were still talking about how one has to acknowledge the basic desires that are like needed to sustain one's life. And I was just wondering how that goes in accordance with what Dogen Zenji says in also in the Tree Monkey, that one should completely cast away one's body and mind and not care if one lives and dies, really, but only practice the way. So, yeah, I was wondering if that's not like a conflict, how those two views can agree with one another, maybe.
Yeah, probably you're referring to that part of the Tree Monkey where he says, leaving behind the world is difficult. But what is even more difficult is, well, leaving your parents, leaving your family. And what is even more difficult is to giving up your body, your physical existence. And then the last thing, but then even more important, difficult than that is to give up your mind. There's so many people who, how do you say, tormented themselves physically because they thought that's a good thing to do, or that will help them to attain nirvana, but you have to even give up that mind. So you have to completely give up everything. But, well, on the surface, of course, that's a contradiction to saying, well, you have to fulfill basic desires here, like eating, drinking, living under a roof, and so on and so on. Well, for me, in practice, I don't see so much of a separation there. Like I think that what Dogen Zenji says when he says give up everything. For example, I talk a lot of you die on the cushion, for example, during a session. Sometimes it feels on day number 2, 3, 4 in the afternoons when it gets really painful. This is killing me. This is killing me. And of course, there are ways to kind of somehow move your legs and make it a little bit more comfortable, or you grind your teeth together and fight yourself through. I'm going to sit for another 5 minutes or so until the bell rings. But Dogen Zenji would probably say, and I would say, give up that, even give up this fighting attitude, and also give up the desire to avoid. You have to die on the cushion. But then at the end of a 5-hour block, the Tenzo rings the, how do you say, the kaishaku, these wooden clappers, and having few desires or no desires doesn't mean that you still sit on and say, well, I don't need to eat now. Of course, you take care of these basic desires. In a way, you could even say that that means to let go, to accept also this body with physical desires, to take care of this person and their needs, just as a bodhisattva, you want to take care of other people. So completely dying on the cushion, in my view, is not, how do you say, contradiction to taking care of others and yourself. And when we talk about small desires, is that you do everything for this person that you need to do. And that's a little, but it's not too much. It's not too much. And you should stop this game that I want this person to shine even more than the others, and I want this person to have better clothes than the others, fancier clothes, a bigger car, bigger house. If you start that game, and a lot of us play that game, there will never be an end to that game. But it doesn't mean that, well, if you don't eat, you will die in a couple of weeks. If you don't drink, you will probably be dead in a week or so. So of course, when you're thirsty, you feel, oh, this person is thirsty, I'm thirsty. Of course you drink. I don't see a problem with that. I don't see a problem with eating when at 10 o'clock it's break time and the Tenzo has made some cookies. Of course you can eat the cookies. And I don't think that then when Dogen Zenji says you should give up body and mind, he's saying don't eat the cookies that the Tenzo made for you, accept them with gratitude. Of course you can eat those cookies. But like something that I was a little strict about when I was the abbot, like I said, it's not really necessary to cut the ties with your family. So sometimes around Christmas season, you get a package from your parents in Antaiji. You get this parcel addressed to you, and there's chocolate in there. I didn't like it when people in their room all by themselves would eat these chocolates. Of course, their parents sent them those chocolates. So, of course, you have all the right to eat it. You don't have to share it. But giving up body and mind doesn't mean that you say, I don't eat these chocolates, but at least you should share them, bring them to the Soto Shokudo, to the tea room, share them with others. So give up this thought, I want them all to myself. And of course, that also leads to the thought then somebody else, your neighbor, also gets a parcel. Then I want also what he has or she has. But yeah, giving up body and mind, I think, means this. I want this for myself. I want this package for myself. I have a right to eat it all by myself. But doesn't mean that you stop eating chocolate altogether.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? 他にご質問ありませんでしょうか? ありませんでしょうか。あ、次回さん、お願いします。
ごめんなさい。あ、いや、トドさん消えちゃった。でも、声、
はい、すいません。
失礼いたしました。すいません。
はい、今ちょっと接続が。
はい、声は聞こえてます。あ、今、映像も、はい、映像もつながってます。
So the body and mind, can you give up one without the other?
Well, at the end of the day, of course, they're connected. But in that quote from the Zui Monkey, I think, well, Dogen Zenji tries to make the point that, well, you can, how do you say, torment yourself, and at least on a superficial level, you give up your physical existence, but you don't give up your mind in the way that you're still doing that because you want to gain something. Satori, for example. You torment yourself almost to death in order to gain something. So in that case, you would be, at least on the surface, giving up your body, but you don't give up your mind. The other way around, giving up the mind without giving up the body. I don't know. I couldn't come up with an example for that right now. But of course, at the end of the day, for Dogen Zenji, these two belong together. So he usually talks of Shinjin Datsurak in Japanese, dropping body mind. And in English, usually we say body and mind. But actually, well, the Chinese and the Japanese, Shinjin is one unit. So when you drop the body, you're dropping the mind. When you drop the mind, you're dropping the body. It's probably what Dogen Zenji would say. And again, dropping doesn't mean like throwing away or denying it. But what I repeatedly say is letting go of something also means to accepting, or Uchiyama Roshi uses the expression opening the hand of thought. So when you let go of something, the hands are open to also accept it. So dropping your body and mind also means accepting your body and mind. So that connects to the previous question. It doesn't mean that you deny your physical needs. It's just that usually we make some kind of multiplication, or we are not even really aware of our real needs. But if you die on the cushion, you feel, I think, much more, how do you say, directly and in an authentic way, what you really need and what you don't need. And before that, most of the other time, what you think your needs are, to a great part, are actually things that you don't need. But well, getting back to your questions, is it possible to drop body and mind separately? Well, in the Zuimonki quote that we talked about, I think Dogen Zenji tries to distinguish them, but at the end of the day, I think also for Dogen Zenji, it's one and the same. Dropping the body means to drop the mind, dropping the mind means to drop the body, and dropping body and mind means also accepting body and mind of yourself and of the others.
May I have an additional question?
Yes.
The other day, in a Dharma talk, I heard that the word Satori comes from the verb, of course, Satoru.
Mm-hmm.
And the explanation from Hamada-san was that forgive me if I get it wrong. Satori experiences are enlightening the way so that one can walk the way, so that one can walk the right way.
Mm.
So my question, I think, is, sorry, it's very unformed, is how important is it to have Satori experiences to lighten the way or enlighten the way?
I mean, if like Dogen Zenji says a lot of things about Satori. One thing that's famous as practice in itself is Satori. Or he says that understanding delusion, realizing that you're deluded, is already Satori. He says that when in the midst of delusion, you begin to practice, you already have Satori, even though you're not aware of it. He says a lot of these things. But of course, there's sometimes experiences, or how would you say it, like glimpses also, when you realize all of this stuff that Dogen and the others talk about, it's not only talk. It's not that they make this up. I'm on the right track. So I would say that, well, it's important to continue to have this feeling of I'm on the right track. On the other hand, I mean, I'm always, or not always, but often, I'm often asked about these Satori experiences. What are they? How important are they? And to be honest, I mean, I don't know. I never really had, I don't know, an experience that I would say this was Satori. They say Dogen had it when he was in China, had this big dropping of body and mind experience when his neighbor fell asleep and his teacher scolded the neighbor. In that moment, Dogen Zenji had this big thing. But nowhere in the Shobogenzo Dogen Zenji writes about it. They say they actually made it up later, so that Dogen Zenji, he needed to have something. But in my case, of course, there were instances during the session, for example, after a session or even outside of the session, where I felt, oh, it was a good thing that I chose this path. But also because in Antais usually don't talk about it. It's not that, as you know, after session, Docho-san would call you and ask you, how was it this time? Did you experience something? And then you would discuss it, what happened through you. Usually something, a little bit happens. There's something happens during these 5 days, but you never really talk about it. So although things happen, you don't, how do you say, verbalize it, you don't make it into these experiences. And I personally think it's a good thing. It's a good thing because you don't run around with this extra load on your shoulders. Here, what I gained this time during session. Here's the experience that I had 3 years ago. So at the end of the day, if you ask me how important are Satori experience, I would say not important at all. Not important at all. I personally, I couldn't tell you any, if you asked me for the biggest during the last 30 or 40 years. I couldn't tell you any, except maybe for these instances of letting go, dying on the cushion where you completely let go and then you feel, but actually there's nothing to lose. This happens from time to time during a session or during Samu and so on. But also, if you now ask me, well, when was the last time it happened? Can you tell me the date? And how? No, I forgot about it. I forgot about it. So if you ask me, are they important? I would say they are not important at all. But on the other hand, if from time to time you wouldn't have this kind of experience, you wouldn't stay on the track, you wouldn't continue. You wouldn't continue if you wouldn't have the feeling but it's not a conscious thing. The problem with these Satori experiences, you verbalize them, you put them into words, and then it becomes a conscious thing. You can talk about it, you can explain it to others, what happened, how it changed you. But I think what is more important is the gut feeling. I'm here. When you're sitting on the cushion and you have this gut feeling, I'm here sitting in the right place. I found my place here. It's important to develop that kind of gut feeling. And I think that gut feeling is much more important than these conscious Satori experiences. At least that's my view.